Hey, what's up, guys? Johnny here with a quick invitation to follow Matt and I over on LinkedIn. One of the things I love about LinkedIn is that it is a sacred space for us just to talk shop, talk business. You don't have to worry about, a sports highlight coming across your feed or a cat video popping up. It's pure business over on LinkedIn. We're connecting with tons of B2B SaaS founders just like yourself. So if you're not following us on LinkedIn, here is your invitation. Check us out. We got tons of bonus content and would love to see you there. I'm Johnny Page.
I'm Matt Verlaque.
And this is the SaaS Academy Podcast. What's up? Matt Verlaque. We're back for another episode of the SaaS Academy Podcast. And today we're going to talk about one of the most destructive and sad behaviors I've seen our founders they go through, and one, I'll just say full disclaimer, one that I have done myself. It is the Achilles heel. It is seeing a founder stop doing something that is working to go do a new thing. And I think, Matt, you've seen a fair bit of this yourself, like this destructive behavior. Let's talk about what causes it. How do we avoid it? How do we recognize when we're doing it? Let's use that as our jumping off point.
There's a lot there, man. Hang on a sec. There's a squirrel outside my window. Just kidding. Dude, there's a lot there. Look,
but before we talk about that, I want to talk about something else.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about acorns. Look, here's the thing is I think this is a brain game, right? Like entrepreneurs, founders by design, like seek novelty and seek challenges and, have that mindset where like, burn the boats. I'm going to go start this thing. And it's a blessing and a curse, but it quickly stops being a blessing and starts being a curse once you've started the thing. And so I think that just psychologically, we think we want to go seek novelty and we enjoy the feeling of the unknown and doing something new and not knowing if it's going to work. And then what ends up happening is something starts working and you're like, oh, sick. I have a business. I have an acquisition channel. I have a sales process. I have this, I have that. How can I grow the business? Let me go try something else. And you seek that same like emotional feeling of trying a new thing that's not going to work, where really the thing that will actually grow the business is doing more of the thing that started to work. It's depth over breadth. That doesn't mean that you never diversify strategies. And I'll talk about later, what would probably need to be true or a way to think about when it's time to do something else in addition to what you're doing now. But the crux of this, dude, is a lot of the founders I coach, like I have this conversation over and over. I've probably had this conversation 24 times. Be like, man, Matt, my growth is plateaued. Cool. How many customers do you have? 50. Well, out of those 50, like, where did you get them? Well, I found the last 30 from partnerships. Awesome. What are you doing with partners right now? Nothing. I'm doing cold outbound. Okay. So did partnerships stop working? No, not really. I figured I should do cold, because I want to grow the business. Like, okay. So you got the majority of your customers from partnerships, and the next move was to stop doing the thing that got you most of your customers to go do an untested strategy that is not working for you. And you're not sure why you're not growing.
Well, it's not where it starts, right? Because they think they can do both, right? They think that they can keep partners running and do cold, and then you look up and you just left partners. You stopped
because they skipped over, to skip to the end, like you skipped over the step. Marcel Petitpas, one of our coaches and the CEO of Parakeeto, like he has this beautiful framework. He applies it to marketing, but it's really true of anything, right? Where it's like you build it, you operationalize it and document it, you assign it to a person. You make sure it's working and that person owns it. And when all of those things are true, then you have earned the right to go do another thing on top of it because the first thing is still going to be working. The problem is most people skip those last couple things, assign it to a person, make sure it's optimized. And it's like, do the thing. Cool. It works. All right. I'm bored with that. I'm going to go do this other thing. That'll keep going, but there's not a plan to do the thing, or they don't realize that like you trying to do 57 different strategies yourself at the same time is always never going to work. And it needs focus to grow. Like these things need focus to grow. We're not superheroes. We're human beings building companies,
Yeah. Dude, I'll tell you the time when I realized I was doing this, it took me. So first off, it's hard to recognize that you do it if you on a small team, because the shrapnel is kind of like, you could see it in your inbox or in your notes file. If you look back at your calendar and you see all the stuff that you've been working on, like you could see some of it, but without people around you that are on the receiving end of this, like, shiny object syndrome, it's harder to see. And it took me a long time to recognize I was doing it. It wasn't until I hired someone, her name was Mackenzie, we called her Mac, that she was very, very like high on follow through. There's a great, I can't remember the name of the test. What's the assessment, the Colbier assessment?
It'll
Like
assess a quick start or a follow through, like that
yes.
thing, right?
Yeah. I'm high on quick start. I like to start stuff, like to have a big vision for it.
I never would have guessed
the time that it takes to like actually see that come to life. Like, you actually don't spend most of your time in start mode. You spend most of your time in follow through and execution mode. And to build a great business, you've really got to the majority of your time is spent there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had someone that was very high on follow through that made me start to realize how many projects we were starting and not finishing. So I developed a thing saying, like, look, I need to work with Max. Like, I got to have someone like Mac in my world that keeps me focused on the main thing. And over time, I've kind of reined in this, desire to start new projects rather than finish them. But it can be hard, man. I think that FOMO leads a lot to, you feel like, hey, if I don't do this, I'm leaving opportunity on the, you can make a great case for starting something new. We're actually incredible at it. It's what gets our companies funded, or team members to come join us. But you can very easily talk ourselves into another distraction, and instead of getting great results, we've just exchanged one set of hard work for another set of hard work.
Totally.
And the progress.
The tricky thing about it, I had this conversation with someone on our team yesterday. The tricky thing about it is it can be a great idea, but a great idea that would work in the isolated evaluation of that idea applied within the greater context. Like, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something, right? So you can have something that absolutely will work and be a great idea, but the cost of executing on it from what you're taking away from something else, you're actually losing more than you're gaining, right? And it's like being able to see that context is the missing link. So I'm a follow through guy. This is why you and I work really well together. And I know how I approach this, but I think that's actually less interesting to the people listening to this, because I think most of the people listening to this are like you, right? Quick starts, all 1,000 ideas, just brimming with creativity. How do you harness yourself? Like, how did you conquer your own brain to follow through on things? Because you're not bad at it now. You're pretty solid on following through on stuff, and so, like, how did you get there from where you used to be?
Well, part of it is like by necessity. Like, you just have to develop the skill if you're going to be successful. Like, you got to recognize the awareness is the first one, the first step. Like, you got to recognize that you're doing this. Let's name it. Call it shiny object syndrome, call it a squirrel moment. Like, your team, you got to even state this tendency to your team, to the people around you. Just say, hey, if you recognize that I'm doing this, just know that it's something I'm working on. I'm aware that I do it. It is a superpower at times. I'm the guy you want in the room when you're like out of ideas, but man, when you're like, trying to get through the last month of a quarter, and it's been 2 months since we got to like start new ideas, like, I'm the last guy you want in the room. So if I start coming in like Wreck-It Ralph and trying to deploy new stuff, you let me know, and we'll work to each other's strengths. So I think, the first one is just an awareness that you do it, communicate it out to your team. And then second is intentionally hiring people that are high on follow through. Like, the company needs both. And an awareness around who is, who's the right person in the right seat is pretty important. Hey, what's up, guys? Johnny here. And I want to take a quick second to ask you a favor. Would you find a friend that would enjoy listening to this show? If you're picking up what we are putting down and taking a lot away from the conversation that Matt and I are having, be a good friend and share this out. Good friends share good episodes. Thank you so much in advance.
Dude, this reminded me, I just pulled it up. Heaton Shaw from Kissmetrics. He wrote this article. It went viral when he wrote it, called "My $1 Billion Mistake." We'll put it in the show notes. But he had this thing where he would come into a meeting, and he called it a Heaton bomb. He would just show up and just like drop a bomb on someone, and everyone would be like, "Oh, the CEO said we got to go do this. We're gonna set this down and do that, and hurry up," and all this chaos. And it's like this, his article walks through, among other things, like his just realization about, like becoming aware of that behavior, and that it usually was not helpful, was a net negative on the team, like all that kind of stuff. It's a great article. We'll link it up in the notes. But I love it. It's really interesting the way you sequenced it too, right? Where you're like, when you're out of ideas, I'm the guy, but when you're trying to get things across the finish line, I'm the last guy you want. Just keep me out of the room and go get after it. That's a pretty self-aware statement, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's just you got to develop an appreciation for saying no, not right now. Like sometimes time, just recognize that you're going to be an ideas machine and, create a notes file, create a parking lot for them. And the ones that last, sometimes the thing that I've observed too is like the really good ideas are the ones that I set down and they just kept coming back. It's like, okay, I can't see around this. Like I've seen, you can have recency bias that if there's not enough friction, you just go with the last good idea you've had.
Yeah.
And instead there should be the right amount of friction to say, oh no, I'm going with the idea that I've been thinking about this thing for, months, for quarters. Like I've seen this over and over again. And the conviction for you and for the team, you see evidence builds over time. So like there's the friction's not always a bad thing. So yeah, I think it's
the first time I heard someone say that, I thought it was crazy. And I'll tell you exactly where it was. And it was in a book. It was one of the books that the guys from Basecamp put out, Jason Fried and DHH. And they were talking about how they manage their backlog. And the summary is the delete key is pretty much how they manage the backlog. Like I'm keeping track of all this stuff. I'm gonna get rid of this whole list of crap, and the important stuff will bubble back up to the surface again and again. And it will be unignorable. It'll be obvious, the thing you need to go solve. Same thing you said, man. I was like, that's terrifying and also probably true. And I read that and I was like, it was one of those things that challenged my belief, but I also like logically was like, this is probably right. And I just stopped really worrying about backlog, long-term backlogs, all that product management stuff. I was like, just going to look at the big buckets of stuff that I can't ignore because the customers keep throwing it at me. And that's probably the right stuff to build. And it was, super simple. So I think
it's good advice, concept of it. It's like supply and demand. Like demand, it is demand. Like it is demanding. The opportunity is demanding your attention, that you supply time, attention, effort to go solve that thing. It's not a fleeting one time, we thought this was a good idea, or we listened to it on a podcast, so like we should be doing that too. Those ones, especially if I found, I love learning. And so I'm constantly listening to podcasts and, you can go to events and just soak up tons of new information. And if you don't have that practice of like, hey, I'm going to let this sit, and the thing that comes back that still feels urgent a week after the event, or a week after I watch the video, or 2 weeks after, like now, the enduring ideas are the ones that demand attention. But yeah, man, this I think it was good to call out some of the attention. Matt, anything else you coach your founders through, like when you see them chasing the shiny object, to overcome this quick start?
Yeah, there's one. And if you're listening to this and you're more like the Matt Verlaques of the world and less like the Johnny Pages of the world, like we'll flip the script for a second. This is how I, as an operator, as a follow-through person, this is how I tame my quick start friends, right? And keep them focused on the mission. The answer is in the metrics and the data that you have, right? Because, to use acquisition channels as the example, it's very easy to have the conversation with someone if they're really excited about this other channel, just to beat up that example for a minute, to be like, hey, this first channel, look at all that it's doing for us, right? Like, have we tapped this channel out? No? Okay. If you go work on this other thing, who's working on that? Oh, all right. So then like, how much of this can we afford to lose? If this channel decreases by 50%, are you confident that this new thing will make up for that 50% decrease plus? Like, is this a good bet? And if you can, not with hyperbole, but with actual numbers, if you can bring that to the discussion, a lot of the times, like, again, you guys are founders, you're smart, you can listen to reason, you see the numbers, you're like, all right, that's probably true. And you just start asking better questions. It doesn't mean that you don't go do the other channel, but it might mean, how long do I have to wait, or what revenue metric do I have to achieve to go hire someone to take care of this first channel so we can go unlock the second one? Like, that's a high quality question, but you don't get there without the data that lets you set the goals or set the hurdles that you need to unlock hires or resources or budget or whatever. So I just think knowing the numbers, because like without the data, the loudest voice in the room wins. And to be real about it, like most CEOs are quick starts, most CEOs are brimming with ideas. And in the absence of data, most CEOs will have the loudest voice in the room and they will win and everyone else will not win. And so I think like if you're not a CEO, particularly if you're not a CEO, bring the data, have a really good like line of reasoning if you truly believe that, you know, doing an idea is damaging. And just, we call it in our company, turning the lights on, right? Like we got to turn the lights on the decision so we can look around the room and see what we're really doing. If you build that muscle, especially the later stage company, if you build that muscle, you will empower everybody around you to make really high quality decisions without them having to become the data driven metrics nerd, follow through savant. Like they're not that person. But if you can, you get to help everyone make good decisions. So that's the other side of the coin.
It's not what I thought you were going to say, although I should have guessed that you'd bring this back to the numbers, because we don't make it through very many conversations without you being like, let me pull out my spreadsheet.
Dude, I'm curious. What did you think I was going to say?
I thought you were going to say like writing it down. Down all the decisions that we made. Let's go back to, in fact, we call Matt the chief writer downer. Like he's if you haven't heard him in the background taking notes on this, like that keyboard sounds like a hurricane's running through the room because of how furiously he types. But you log, you know, whether it's through meeting follow-up notes of logging our commitments and the decisions that we made, like you writing things down, taking verbal commitments and turning them into written commitments, and then keeping the list of like, this is the stuff we said we do this year, this quarter, this week, this month. It helps that, you know, keep that executional discipline front and center when, you know, I don't think this is a place that I naturally live. I like, you know, I like thinking about what could we be doing that we're not doing. And yeah, kudos is part of what makes us a great team. But yeah, the written commitments are huge for that as well. And of course the data is as well. I mean, it's hard to ignore making a good business case for why should we stay the course?
Yeah, no doubt. Or why should we depart the course? I think you know, the truth is in the data in either direction, you know, because the opposite is true, which is probably a topic for another episode. But, you know, there's a point of diminishing returns around like, do what you say you're going to do, right? Like you have to leave yourself space to get smarter. And so I love the writing down example and the making sure we know what our commitments were. But I think it still comes back to the performance data of being able to realize like, when is a strategy so good that you would be irresponsible to turn it off? Or when is a strategy so unperformant that you would be irresponsible to not turn it off, right? At what point do you have to set the goal down? You know, I'm going to do outbound, but like, man, if you're going hardcore, 100%, leaning into the strategy with everything you got, no distractions, resources, help, you know, budget, the whole nine, and you do it for months and it doesn't work, it might be the strategy. Like that's not the first lever I pull. It's usually the person, the system, the process, the approach, the knowledge. There's usually something else, but if you exhaust that whole list, you know, you got to know when to turn something off too. So I think it's true on both sides, but being able to track the numbers and the data and the results, like that's what unlocks those decisions being intelligent. So
yeah, I mean, with the right amount of process and the right amount of friction, make sure that there's a really deep conviction of the new direction, and it's not just something based on like recency. Like there's a mountain to climb here. If you want to distract this from the plan, doesn't mean that there's not a place and a time for that, but you're gonna have to check some boxes before we get there. Otherwise, like, you know, the checks and balances are in place on purpose, and always in hindsight we look back and we're like, yeah, I'm really glad that, like, look, I think we're playing to our strengths. Like most of the time it's like, we stayed the course. We made good decisions in our quarterly planning and annual planning cycles. And, you know, on the occasional pivot, it was for a really good reason. And it got complete buy-in from the quick starts and the implementers because, you know, the data was there to support it. And, you know, went through the right communication channel. So, dude, I don't know what we call this. Shiny object syndrome is the thing I've always called it, but
it's a good as name as any. It's a good a name as any, man. I love it. If you take one thing from this rant, guys who are team who's listening, like take this, like keep doing the thing that's working unless you have a quantitative and high confidence reason not to. Like your default approach should just be keep doing what's working. So just use that as a gut check, catch yourself, because the things you're not doing always feel more exciting. But usually the thing that's working is probably what you need to keep doing. If you take nothing else in this episode, take that. It's half the battle, man.
Well said, dude.
Cool. Thanks for listening, everybody. Appreciate it. See ya.